Hello and welcome to Education and Democracy. My name is Kevin Lister. I was a maths teacher at New College, Swindon, and I was fired for not referring to a female as a male and for not following the college's gender reassignment policy. As a result, I was then referred to the DBS, the Government's Disclosure and Barring Service, and put on the children's barred list. I'm taking New College Swindon to the Employment Appeals Tribunal. My case will be heard in May next year, and we will be arguing in that appeal that the college's gender reassignment policy was fundamentally discriminatory and that the college was attempting to change my beliefs. And I will be taking the government's Disclosure and Barring Service to the upper tribunal to appeal the decision by them to put me on the children's barred list. If you'd like to contribute to my legal cases, then click on the GoFundMe link below. If you are not able to contribute but you'd like to support, then do click the like button and subscribe to the channel. What I'll do today is I'll just talk a little bit about one of the big issues that one of the big questions that I think needs to be asked about the transgender movement, and that is how it got going. So I want to talk about that, and then when I've done that, when I've got a captive audience, I always like to do a bit of maths teaching, so I'll do some maths teaching on constructions and equations of the circles and quadratics and see how all that can tie together. So I do hope you stay for the whole thing, and I do hope you stay for the maths lesson at the end. So the question that I want to tackle today is, how did the transgender ideology become so entrenched in our schools? And the prevailing wisdom all the time is that it is a social contagion, and if you Google on the causes of transgender, then invariably it comes up with it is a social contagion. And the kind of idea is that it was a child-led movement. It was children on TikTok and on Instagram and going to various other social media sites and all egging each other on and furthering the message. Now, what I want to propose to you today is that it was not a child-based movement, it was an adult-based movement. And it was adults who were driving this with the most malevolent of intent. And what really the other thing I want to think about on this is, as we build up the argument, is that this is a case of Occam's razor. That when there is a choice of hypotheses, that it is generally the hypothesis with the least amount of assumptions that is the hypothesis that is most likely to be true. So I'll be using a bit of the Occam's razor approach in terms of establishing the adult-led nature of the transgender movement. So the starting point for this is from a Freedom of Information request that was made by the Telegraph some time ago. And it was a big document. It was about 264 pages. And to be quite frank, the Telegraph did a great job of getting this, but I don't ever think they properly explored the information that was in it. And the Telegraph's FOI was to the Tavistok Centre, and it was to list all communications between the Tavistok Centre and mermaids. Now, in this bundle has come this meeting minute from July 2015. Now, this is a particularly interesting set of minutes. It's from a parliamentary forum, so it's been from the House of Commons, or it's been taken place in the House of Commons. I assume it to have been taken place in the House of Commons. And what is interesting is that there are no elected MPs. So when we look at the attendees at the meeting, it is chaired by Baroness Barker. So Baroness Barker is a Lib Dem peer. She's highly prominent in the transgender movement, and she is, for example, an ambassador for the Albert Kennedy Trust. And the Albert Kennedy Trust is an organization that takes under its wing children who've been convinced by the schools that they're of the wrong sex. When the child goes home to the parents and says, I'm the other sex, and the parent says, no, you're not, then the child can then go to the Albert Kennedy Trust, and they can give them accommodation, and the child can say that he needs to stay there because his parents are transphobes. Now, the next person down is Helen Belcher. Helen Belcher is this chap, and Helen Belcher is a bloke. He's a bloke that likes dressing up as a woman. And Helen Belcher is now a councillor, has been a councillor in Wiltshire. He has sat on the children's committees in the area, and he is also a member of Transactive, and that organisation has specialised in trying to silence any gender critical views in the press. So Helen Belcher is a bloke, just to be clear here, Lib Dem member, a Lib Dem councillor. He stood for election in Reading in the last general election, and he didn't get in. So there's our political grouping: Baroness Barker and Helen Belcher, both of the Lib Dem party. As I say, no elected MPs at this meeting at all. Now, what is particularly disturbing is the rest of the attendees. So the rest of the attendees, we've got a mixture now of civil servants and transgender activists. So Louise Baker from the Department of Education, civil servant. Jenny Ann Bishop, Transform Manchester. Jenny Ann, again, is a bloke. He describes himself as a long-time transgender woman. And this charming picture is Jenny Ann. The next person we got is Dr. John Dean. Dr. John Dean is from the Laurels Clinic. The Laurels Clinic is a gender clinic in Exeter. The clinic obviously survives on getting as many people as it can through its door to try and provide them with a medical treatment. Interestingly, John Dean is listed on the government website, such that if you are looking to get a gender reassignment certificate, a GRC, then the government's guidance is that you need to go to a doctor who is suitably qualified in gender dysphoria, and John Dean, according to the government, is suitably qualified. So you can go to John Dean, you can get your gender reassignment certificate, and then you can go into his clinic and then have various things taken off you. The next person, again, is a civil servant. It's Suzanne Dean from NOMS. This is the National Offender Management Service. It's now the Prison and Probation Service. So her attendance at the meeting was to start pushing and supporting transgender or men presenting as women to be able to go into the female prison estate. Next person we've got is a transgender activist, Susie Green from Mermaids. And Susie Green should need no introduction. She put her child, her son, on puberty blockers when he was 12, and then took him to Thailand for his 16th birthday to have his penis and testicles removed and to have a neo-vagina created. Joanne King is from Gender Trust, another transgender activist who specialised in supporting families to transition their children. Then we've got another transgender activist, James Morton, an academic, Professor Zoe Playden, don't know much about her. Alison Pritchard from the Government Equalities Office, so again another civil servant. And then Terry Reid from Gears and Clara Thompson from the Ministry of Justice. So again, the last one here is another civil servant. So, as I say, we have a series of civil servants, a series of transgender activists, and we have no elected MPs at all overseeing this. So there is a fundamental question of what's going on here. Why are all these civil servants meeting transgender activists under the chairmanship of Baroness Barker and effectively Helen Belcher from Transmedia Watch? Now, the thing I want to home in on is section 3, and this is about issues affecting the education of trans children. And this really is not what it sounds. This is not about issues affecting the education of trans children. When you read through the text of this is about how the transgender ideology was to be introduced into schools and how it was to be enforced into schools. And to try and put this in perspective, and just taking some of the points here as to how unbelievably callous these minutes are. To start off with, we've got Susie Green, SGM, Susie Green Mermaids, talking about her experience of school. Some either incredibly willing and supportive of trans children, or they refuse to engage at all, making it practically impossible to negotiate with them. So what's basically happening here is that in July 2015, a good number of schools, by Susie Green's own statement, were trying to resist the transgender ideology being brought onto their premises, most likely because they saw it for what it was, a serious safeguarding issue, a serious effort at indoctrinating children into this movement. Again, to try and put this into perspective, when we go down a little bit further, we've got another statement here about the DFE and knowing of several transitioning children who are aged 7 or younger. Now, what is particularly disturbing about this is that at no time is any concern raised about safeguarding or any concern raised about the risk of a false positive. So Susie Green, for example, talks about she's working with 20 families. She does not talk about what the success rate of transitioning is going to be with those 20 families. So, for example, would say 50% of those families subsequently come to regret their decision. So no talk at all about safeguarding. There's no record of anybody in this meeting raising any concerns whatsoever about what is being discussed. They then go on and discuss the options effectively of using legal actions against schools and presumably against teachers. Now, effectively, I had a legal action taken against me. I ended up in the employment tribunal and I lost it because of the design of the Equality Act. And so there is an effort here to use the law to try and support the transgender ideology or the enforcement of the transgender ideology in schools. And that is exactly what happened. It has happened to me and it's happened to numerous other teachers across the country. And until the Higgs victory in the Employment Appeals Tribunal just recently, every single other teacher, every single other case that has gone to a tribunal has failed. So they have been successful in getting the law to be used to silence any gender critical teachers. They go down a little bit further. There's discussion here about trying to enforce the preferred names. So discussions here about what regulations there is about legal names, and that kind of moved on to the enforcement of preferred names and pronouns. Again, with this wide open statement here, the clear ruling was that schools must not discriminate. Again, that is a statement that means really nothing at all when they're not considering the danger of discrimination against gender critical people. The other thing that happened up here as well was that Susie Green had made reference to parents not agreeing with a child's attempt to transition. And one of the things that started occurring in schools, and it was my experience, was that schools would not tell parents. Now, I suspect that the guidance for that came from mermaids, from having basically by having their nose put out of joint, by not getting parental consent from parents, and from parents resisting the attempts by schools to transition children. The other thing that was super concerning in this as well is the attempt by the trans activists to use social services. Now again, this happened in my case. So the bottom paragraph on page 3, Susie Green Mermaids replied that clarity from sources was paramount. She'd like something definitive that applies for any age. She goes on to say, she noted that some schools had reported parents to social services for allowing their children to transition. Now this is terrible. Now, first of all, I was reported to the Swindon Borough Council social services, to the LADO, the local area designated officer, for being against transitioning. But since I went public, I have had numerous parents who've contacted me to say the same, that they have resisted their school's attempt to transition their children, and their schools have reported them to social services for investigation of child abuse. So this again is another action effectively that seems to have come out of this meeting to start engaging social services, and it's a pattern that has emerged across the country. The other thing was another statement from Susie Green Mermaids, SGM. SGM added that schools which had done this, basically transition children, were often very proud of what this said about their inclusivity. Now, what Susie Green of Mermaids has been trying to do here is, and what she was successful in doing, was getting the schools to engage in a race to the bottom. So when I was at New College, they had a diversity report that they issued every year, and they were proud to say in the diversity report about the increasing numbers of transgender students. And no doubt the other schools in the area were probably doing the same. So what we actually had, or it seems to me what we had in Wiltshire, was a race to the bottom, was for the schools to show everything that they could about the inclusivity credentials, irrespective of the safeguarding risks, irrespective of the damage it was causing to families, irrespective of the damage it was causing to the education. But all they wanted was this race down to the bottom. And again, this seems to be something that has been supported by the Department for Education. Now, the reason I say the Department for Education have so supported this was that when I was being investigated, before I was suspended, I referred New College Swindon to the Department for Education through the whistleblowing line. And I said that my two safeguarding concerns that I had raised about student A transitioning and about another teacher, I said that neither of those safeguarding concerns had been addressed, and the Department for Education said it was nothing to do with them. It was an employment issue, and that as far as they were concerned, there was no safeguarding issue whatsoever. So this kind of statement, I think, here where Susie Green was trying to get the schools to basically compete against themselves for inclusivity, did, as best as I can see from my experience, get used by the Department for Education, and it was put into place. The next thing coming down, the next sort of really glaring thing is the acknowledgement from Ofsted. So again, Susie Green is driving this one here. Susie Green Mermaids replied that schools get acknowledgement from Ofsted about good equality policies, and that schools can use this as a marketing statement. And again, this happened. I reported New College Swindon to Ofsted. I explained to Ofsted that neither of my safeguarding concerns had been addressed. Ofsted then subsequently investigated New College Swindon, and despite the fact it was clear that neither of my safeguarding concerns had been addressed, Ofsted in their report said there was no safeguarding issues, even though that they knew that there was, even though that there was an investigation by the college that concluded that my safeguarding concerns had not been addressed. Now, what was interesting on this was that Ofsted were working closely with Stonewall, and there was a tight working relationship between the two. So again, this thing here with Ofsted is something that there's good evidence that this was put into place. The trans ideology would be enforced with help by Ofsted. Baroness Barker, BNSB, Baroness Barker, wanted to keep this item under review over the coming year. She felt that there was lots that could be done, for example, talking with teachers' unions. Now, all the teachers' unions have fallen hook, line and sinker for the transgender ideology. And there is, in my experience, no time in the past has there been a case where the unions and the government and the civil servants have been in such unison. So the NEU, which is the union that I was in, the National Education Union, was vehemently supportive of the transgender ideology and the rights of children to transition and the necessity of teachers to support them. And even now, after the Cass review, after the Supreme Court ruling, they are still trying to push motions to support LGBTQ in schools and to support effectively the transitioning of children. So again, this is something that seems to have been put into place with absolute gusto. Coming on down at the bottom, Stonewall were starting on trans inclusivity and training as part of the schools programme. And again, up and down the country, Stonewall have been encouraged into schools to do the various Stonewall ratings. As to, you have a gold, silver and bronze rating, I think it is. And all the schools wanted to have the highest Stonewall rating that they could possibly get. And basically the Stonewall ideology was brought straight into schools. Now, in addition to that, Stonewall also worked closely with the Department for Education to have the Keeping Children Safe in Education guidance changed to become completely trans supportive. Now, Nancy Kelly was one of the senior officers in Stonewall, and when she resigned, she tweeted here what she had done. She said, and she secured changes to keeping children safe in education and making it clear that being LGBTQ+ is not a safeguarding risk. The children from our community are at elevated risk from others. So really trying to play this idea here that it's everybody else that's causing a safeguarding risk. It's not a safeguarding risk to encourage a child to start taking wrong sex hormones. Now, the part of the Keeping Children Safe in Education that she managed to get changed and that she's referring to is these two paragraphs here, paragraph 203 and 204. So these were inserted into the safeguarding guidance for schools. Okay, now take a second to read these. The fact that a child or a young person may be LGBT is not in itself an inherent risk factor for harm. I mean, this is absurd. The L, the G and the B, no one really cares about. Whatever someone wants to experiment with, so long as it's with consenting people and hopefully the people are over 16, then that's not really an issue. The issue is this T part. And when a young person is encouraged to take wrong sex hormones, that is inherently a risk factor for harm. But what Nancy Kelly goes on to say is, however, children who are LGBT can be targeted by other children. Well, perhaps they can, and that should be stopped but under the normal bullying procedures of any college or school. In some cases, a child who is perceived by other children to be LGBT, whether they are or not, can be just as vulnerable as children who identify as LGBT. So these last two sentences are just nothing other than the normal bullying policy in a school should be able to resolve. Now, this is where it gets really insidious. Paragraph 204. Risks can be compounded where children who are LGBT lack a trusted adult with whom they can be open. Well, what is a trusted adult? This has gone in to this went in, it's now fortunately been taken out, but this went in to the school's guidance for safeguarding. Now, this is completely and utterly counter to all good safeguarding practice. What do we mean by a trusted adult? Well, when I was at New College Swindon, they had at least one lecturer who was quite open about his affiliation with mermaids and his desire to start bringing mermaids material into the college and doing fundraising exercises with students. And I would presume that the college saw him as a trusted adult. Now, there is no way in God's earth that I would want my child in the company of somebody like that. They then go on, even worse. It is therefore vital that staff endeavour to reduce the additional barriers faced and provide a safe space for them to speak out or share their concerns with members of staff. So now we end up with these confidential spaces where these strange trusted adults can have direct access to children. I mean, this was a charter for grooming. I mean, this was absolutely surreal. And that is thanks to mermaids that we've got that in the keeping children safe in education. So, what else can we say about that? Well, the two politicians of sorts, Helen Belcher and Baroness Barker, were from the Lib Dems. And when we look at the funding that the Lib Dems received in total from 2013 to 2019, they received £1.494 million, £1,494,242 from Ferring Pharmaceuticals. So it was the third largest private donation. And Ferring Pharmaceuticals manufacture puberty blockers and testosterone. Now, again, back to Occam's razor, well, why would Ferring Pharmaceuticals want to support the Lib Dems? Well, I would suggest that Ferring Pharmaceuticals wanted to open a marketplace for their products, and the best way of them developing that marketplace was to target children, just in the same way as the tobacco industry targeted children in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up. So this is completely insidious. This is the biggest funding to the Lib Dems, and strangely enough, the Lib Dems seem to be opening this meeting with this arterial route into the senior civil servants across multiple departments. Ferring Pharmaceuticals, if you go to Ferring Pharmaceuticals wiki page and look down at the controversies, the chief executive was this gentleman, Friedrich Paulsen, and he was best buddies of Vladimir Putin. So he has got a merit of friendship that was awarded to him from Vladimir Putin. And the question then goes, well, maybe, just maybe, back to Occam's razor, this is a thing that has been directed straight from the Kremlin. The Kremlin pal up with Ferring Pharmaceuticals, and Ferring Pharmaceuticals pal up with the Lib Dems, and the Lib Dems use their influence to push the transgender ideology straight into schools. What would be the best way to undermine society? The best way to undermine society is to undermine the family structure. And that is exactly what the trans movement has done. It has completely shattered the relationships and for thousands of people between children and the parents. Okay, now there's quite a bit of speculation here. Maybe this was just a chummy meeting and nothing here was actually put into practice at all. But that's not what the evidence says. When we go to the CAS review, what we see is at 2015, we had this huge surge in admissions to the Tavistok Centre, and then the grey bit here is for potential further unregistered transgender actions or people moving into the transgender market. So 2015 was when we have the meeting, when we start seeing the trans ideology being enforced in schools, and certainly as a teacher, this is when I saw it hitting the schools almost immediately after the meeting in July 2015. And after that, we have this explosion of young people presenting to the Tavistok Centre, and to say these grey areas, which is potentially self-medication thereafter. So off into enormous numbers. Now, as I say, Occam's razor, I don't know if this is all one great big conspiracy leading from the Kremlin through Ferring, through the Lib Dems, down into the classrooms, but it all smells pretty suspicious. And if it sounds like a duck and it quacks like a duck and it swims like a duck, then it's probably a duck. And it seems to me, looking at the minutes of this meeting and looking at the funding that went into the Lib Dems, that this was an adult-led movement, and the social media aspect was just an amplification of that message that came from the adults. And I think this is why my cases are going to be so important, that the thing that we need to do to stand against these adult-led movements is to make sure that we have proper freedom of speech in the classroom, proper academic freedom, and that people like me are not put on the barred list on spurious political grounds to allow these adults to be let off the hook. So be interested in your comments, put your comments below, but to me this is adult-led. That said, let's now talk about some decent things, and let's start moving on to a little bit of maths teaching. And what I'm going to do today is bring together constructions and quadratics and equations of a circle. So do hang around for that and have some light relief with some mathematics. Thank you very much. Okay, and welcome back. And what I'm going to do today is talk about constructions and equations of a circle and quadratic formulas and show how all these tie together. Now, what I'm going to prove to you is that if we've got this quadratic equation, x squared minus bx plus c, then the solutions to this equation is the intersections of this circle with the x-axis. So x1 and x2 are the solutions to the quadratic equation that we've got at the top up here. Now, what's particularly cool about this is that this entire diagram can be constructed using only a straight edge and a compass. When I talk about straight edge, I do not mean a ruler. It literally is just a straight edge and a compass. So let me just talk about the diagram first as to how we would go about constructing that. First thing we would do is we would construct the axes. Now we can construct an x and y axis using a straight edge and a compass, and that's stuff that you would have seen from kind of year 7, year 8 in English schools. Once we've constructed the x and the y axis, we set our compass to 1 and we plot this point A, which is the point 0 along and 1 up. Okay, we then plot the point B, and in this case here B is 6 along and 5 up, so again we can plot this point using just our compass and our straight edge, and I'm going to label this as little b and little c. So the little b and the little c are taken from the quadratic equation that we got up here, x squared minus bx plus c, and you'll see that the quadratic equation is written in the form of a minus b, and I've got the x coordinate for b as being little b over here, and the c value on the quadratic equation is the y value for b. So as I say, we can select these points here, we can plot these points using just our compass and straight edge. So in this case here, b is 6. We set our compass to 1, and we'd mark 1 here, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, and we'd plot, or we construct a perpendicular at 6 using our compass and straight edge, and then do the same and plot up to this coordinate here for c, which is 5. Okay, now again, just to sort of to convince you that I'm heading off in the right direction, if b here is equal to 6 and c is equal to 5, then we've got from our quadratic x squared minus 6x plus 5 would be equal to 0, and if I factorize this, I would have x minus 5 times x minus 1 would be equal to 0, and so that would then give me x is equal to 5 and x is equal to 1, which in fact is where x1 and x2 are lying. So it seems to be, just looking at this, that this theory seems to work, that if we can construct this shape, we can get the roots of the quadratic as being the intersections of the circle with the x-axis. So let's take this one a little bit further now. Let's prove to ourselves that the roots are where the circle intersects the x-axis. Now, so what we're going to need to do this is we're going to need to get the equation of a circle, and just to remind you, the equation of a circle is x minus a squared plus y minus b squared is equal to r squared, and a and b are the center of the circle. And in this case here, just to avoid mixing the b up with the b I've already got here, I'll call that b1 and a1. So b1 there and a1 there. So this coordinate here is a1 and b1. Okay, so let's think about how we can find a1 and b1. Well, we know that if I move along here, draw a horizontal line from A going to B, I can draw a right angle triangle in here, then the distance from A to the midpoint here must be B divided by 2. Okay, so B is at height C. I've got a length of 1 along the bottom. So the vertical height of this triangle is C minus 1. And if I want the B coordinate here, well, in fact, it's just simply going to be C plus 1 divided by 2. Okay, add the two y values together and divide by 2. Okay, so I've got the center of the circle. Effectively, I've got A1 and I've got B1 here. And what I now need is the radius of the circle. And again, I can draw a right angle triangle and we go for a different color pen. So I can have a right angle triangle up here, and I already know the x value here must be b divided by 2, and the vertical height of this right angle triangle would be c minus 1 divided by 2. Okay, so that said, I can now find the radius, and I can just get that from Pythagoras. So the radius squared is c minus 1 divided by 2 squared plus b divided by 2 squared. So as I tidy that one up a bit, I'm going to get c squared minus 2c plus 1 divided by 4, so c minus 1 squared, and then I square the 2, and then I get over here b squared divided by 4. So now I've got everything now to populate my equation for the circle. So let's see what the equation for the circle starts looking like. So the A1 value is b divided by 2. So I now get x minus b divided by 2 all squared. The b1 value is a c plus 1 divided by 2. So now I get y minus c plus 1 divided by 2 all squared is equal to the r squared value, which is the blue values I've got above. So that becomes c squared minus 2c plus 1 divided by 4 plus b squared divided by 4. Okay, now I'm trying to find x1 and x2. Now what I know is that x1 and x2 is that the y values are 0. So I can say here at x1 and x2 the y values are equal to 0. So what we can now write is x minus b divided by 2 all squared plus, with the y equals 0, I'm now left with just minus c plus 1 over 2 all squared, which is basically just c plus 1 over 2 all squared. So effectively I've lost a negative here by squaring it out. Is now going to equal c squared minus 2c plus 1 divided by 4 plus b squared divided by 4. Okay, let's tidy this out. We're trying to find x, so we're going to make x a subject to the formula. So I can rewrite this now as x minus b divided by 2 all squared is equal to c squared minus 2c plus 1 divided by 4 plus b squared divided by 4 minus c plus 1 divided by 2 all squared. So the right hand side now simplifies out, c squared minus 2c plus 1 plus b squared. Then I've got this, the minus c plus 1 squared, so that becomes minus c squared minus 2c minus 1. So I've expanded that out, multiplied through by minus 1. The 2 squared is 4, so this whole thing now is divided by 4. And so what that now is going to give me is x minus b divided by 2 all squared. And so we simplify out here on the right side, the c squareds are going to cancel. I've got the b squared left here. I've got a plus 1 and a minus 1, so they're going to cancel. And then I've got minus 2c, which gives me minus 4c. And this whole thing is now over 4. Take the square root on both sides, so x minus b divided by 2 is equal to the square root of b squared minus 4c. It's going to be plus and minus. When I take the square root of 4, I get 2. Take the b divided by 2 across, and then we've effectively got something that looks very much like the quadratic equation. So I've now got b divided by 2 plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4c divided by 2, which is b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4c divided by 2, and there's my x values. So if we go back up to the diagram, the x1 value up here is basically going to be the b minus the square root of b squared minus 4c divided by 2, and the x2 value would be plus the square root of b squared minus 4c all divided by 2. So isn't that super cool? We've effectively now got a solution to a quadratic formula. So we can now say for x squared minus bx plus c equals 0, then what we've now got is x equals b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4c divided by 2. Now, what we have in schools is a positive b in our quadratic equation, so we can just do a mapping now. We can say when b equals, or rather we can just do a transformation, so we can just transform the b to a minus b. So when b goes to minus b, what we're then going to get is x squared plus bx plus c equals 0, gives us x is equal to minus b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4c all divided by 2. And so here we've got the quadratic equation. The only thing we haven't got is the a value. So typically when we show the quadratic equation in schools, we've got ax squared plus bx plus c, and we have over here b squared minus 4ac, and we have 2a on the denominator. But that's a trivial step. You can test that out for yourself. Put an a in front of the x squared, then divide through by a, and the b becomes b divided by a, and then you can sort the equation out on the right hand side accordingly. But this is, I think, this is just super cool. There we got the quadratic equation, and so we've got this idea now, this wonderful construction. Right back up at the top here, we can solve our quadratic equation using just a straight edge and a compass. And weren't the Greeks incredibly sharp, intelligent people? They didn't need calculators. All they needed was a straight edge and a compass. And I think this is just a great, I think, a great little bit of maths, a really nice simple bit of maths. It takes the construction stuff that kids are taught in the early years of secondary school, and it's left in the foundation papers. It's typically almost like one of these padding kind of questions that foundation students get when they never really understand quite what it's about. And in fact, it leads to fundamental issues and questions in mathematics, like what is constructible? Well, we can construct solutions to a quadratic equation. Well, could we then construct a solution to a cubic equation or a quartic equation or a quintic equation? Now, what I can tell you is we cannot construct a solution to a quintic equation. I'll leave it open to you to find out if we can construct cubics or quartic solutions. But this is why maths is so beautiful, that we have these, often when we have limitations in things, in this case we've got a limitation like what can we do with a ruler and a compass. Well, to find what you can do within a limitation, I think is just like one of the most beautiful things, one of the most sort of beautifully philosophical things, that we can discover solutions to quadratic equations using only a compass and a straight edge. We don't even need a ruler, we just need a straight edge. And isn't that, I just think that is just superb. And if you don't find that superb, then you should give up learning maths. So let me just scroll through the page here just so you can see the solution again. I'll just briefly talk through it. So we got our quadratic equation x squared minus bx plus c at the top. We checked it worked. We found this the center point AB. We found the radius. We applied the equation of a circle. We set y equal to 0. Then we just go through boring algebra, and we drop the quadratic equation out the bottom. And when we just do this transformation when b with b going to minus b, then we get the final quadratic formula. And then, as I say, you can satisfy yourself that if we've got ax squared plus bx plus c, we can get the normal quadratic equation on the right hand side. So thank you very much for listening. As I say, do hope you found that interesting and worthwhile sitting through all the trans stuff to get to.